Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us for this Hearts information session. The UT Dallas Humanities and Emerging Arts Grant, or HARTS, is an internal funding mechanism designed to promote scholarly activities in the form of research, outreach, and/or creative activities in all disciplines that will result in publications, recognition, awards, or exhibitions and performances. This program is well suited to support the endeavors of those tenured or tenure-track faculty with school affiliations that are outside of STEM. I am Danny Lamb, Coordinator for Program Development and Outreach in the Office of Research and Innovation, and I will serve as your session moderator for today's discussion. During today's event, Dr. Matthew Brown, Dr. Juan Llamas Rodriguez, and Dr. Honia Wu will discuss their awardee experience, how they use the funds, and what benefits come from the funding mechanism. Also joining us is Emily Lacy, Director for the Office of Sponsored Projects, to answer any questions specific to the grant. Dean Romer will kick us off with the importance of the HARTS grant. Dean Romer, welcome.
Thank you. Happy to kick this off. I'm happy also to be not part of STEM and in parts of the HARTS. I mean, lots of ways I think we got the better name here today. And this is a really important program for our faculty. It's a great way to launch new research, new opportunities that ideally then at some point or another translate into bigger grants and bigger projects. But it's a good way for much of our faculty, both in A&H, Arts and Humanities, and in ATech, to kind of get themselves going. I'm particularly also appreciative of the wide range of activities that are supported here. You already said it. It's anything, any form of research, outreach, or creative activities. So that really covers everything that is done in these two schools, on the arts and performances on the one side to the critical design and practice to the other, and everything in between. So today, therefore, is a double show and tell of our distinguished faculty and the wonderful things that they're doing, but also another, telling of that wonderful opportunity that is just around the corner again. And I think the deadline is coming up for applications at the end of May. So hopefully this program will also inspire others to follow in the tracks of those that have gone before and apply and make that part of their portfolio for the coming future. So therefore, I'm going to hand this back over to you and be excited to hear my faculty talk about the wonderful things that they've done. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dean Romer. I'm glad to welcome our first presenter for today, Dr. Honia Wu. Dr. Wu?
Hi, everyone. I'm Dr. Honia Wu. I go by Anne with she, her pronouns. I'm an assistant professor in critical media studies from the School of Arts, Technology, and Emerging Communication, or ATech for short. There, I co-direct the research and creative collective called the Studio for Mediating Play with my ATech colleague, Dr. Joseph Newman. Today, on behalf of my co-PI, Dr. Joseph Newman, I'll be presenting on a research project titled Patching Default Settings, Radical Feminist Gameplay that we undertook along with our research collective, the Studio for Mediating Play. Instrumental financial support for this project was generously provided by the Humanities and Emerging Arts Grant, so the HARTS grant from the Office of Research at UT Dallas, to cover our research activities all the way from summer of 2019 through spring of 2021. This grant was not only instrumental in helping us carry out the activities for this project, but it also helped us to further develop and refine our studio's research profile and visibility across the field of critical feminist game studies through the completion of this project. Thus, our presentation today will introduce a bit about the formation of our studio, the activities we carried out as part of this grant support, as well as the various scholarly outcomes of this project. So what is the Studio for Mediating Play all about? Our studio's goal is to integrate critical research and creative practice with intersectional feminist theory to address pressing social and material issues through engagements with and about play. So in the sense, our studio treats play both as a significant cultural phenomena of study, as well as grounding for critical research and practice, exploring how play is shaped by and can be used to probe existing systems of power. So in our studio, we draw inspiration from art, performance, and other kinds of studio-based practices as our methods, research methods for conducting our investigations. From designing experimental games to examining fandom and reception practices, the Studio for Mediating Play investigates how play both mediates and is mediated by cultural and material forces. As mentioned before, our studio is co-directed by Dr. Joseph Nguyen and myself, and our studio is made possible by a long list of past, current, and ongoing active collaborators. These collaborators include undergraduate students, graduate students, and faculty in and out of ATEC. Upon coming to ATEC in 2016 and 2017 respectively, Dr. Nguyen and I noticed a critical mass of faculty and students here interested in researching and investigating the social and cultural significance of contemporary play practices, most notably in the case of digital gameplay. As such, we started the studio in late 2018 as a way to convene and collaborate around our shared interests. Over the years, our collaborators contribute their time and creative practice to shape the direction of our studio's research and creative output. Our studio is currently housed under and receives support from the School of Arts, Technology, and Emerging Communication. While we are centrally located at UTD campus, our studio welcomes active participation by external and remote collaborators interested in supporting the studio's mission and projects. And indeed, many of our students that have graduated from UTD and moved on to other institutions for further studies or jobs continue to participate in our studio meetings and projects and research as external and remote collaborators. So after launching the studio in 2018-2019 academic year, we were looking for ways to focus the studio's activities around a theme. Around then, we came across the Hearts Grant competition call, and we took to writing a research proposal on the project Patching Default Settings for this grant competition as a way for us to narrate a clear research direction and profile for our shared activities for the upcoming year. And it was successfully selected for funding. So very briefly, Patching Default Settings Radical Feminist Gameplay is a project that researches and intervenes in mainstream gaming through creative and critical practice informed by intersectional feminist theory and politically engaged art. Drawing on feminist research that interrogates sexist, racist, classist, heteronormative, and ableist logics common in commercial game titles and gaming practices, this project aims to develop original experimental artworks about games, gameplay, and game cultures that render and envision alternative ways of playing. Through Patching Default Settings, our studio financially and intellectually supported participating UTD faculty and students in developing and showcasing feminist scholarship and experimental art about gaming. Additionally, as part of Patching Default Settings, our studio invited feminist game studies scholars and designers from other institutions across the US to visit UT Dallas for a series of workshop, presentation, critique sessions, author conversations, and other events in support of feminist research and praxis in games and gaming culture. While originally intended for only a year, this project ended up lasting well over 2 years upon the impact of the pandemic. Well, the project proposed and included a series of related activities aimed towards this mentoring students as critical researchers and creative practitioners, such as open studio working time or critique sessions for ongoing research that collaborators bring their own work into. A core component of Patching Default Settings involved inviting and hosting several well-known feminist game studies scholar designer to UT Dallas campus in order to lead critical game design workshops, interface with students and faculty, and acquire a strong sense of the ATEC school as a destination and hub for critical feminist game studies and game design. Before the pandemic, we brought 3 such guests to the campus and host workshops, including Dr. Alex Agloro from Arizona State University, Dr. Amanda Phillips from Georgetown University, and Dr. Carly Kucerek from Illinois Institute of Technology. Following the emergency of the pandemic, we shifted to conducting the project remotely online, whereby not only our regular studio meetings were held online, but also the guest visits we had originally planned. As such, we also reframed a little bit the original workshop idea by focusing on inviting scholars to discuss their recent monographs in game studies, particularly with graduate students. We facilitated 5 such meetings with recent monograph authors, such as Dr. Tara Fickle, to discuss their recent book titled The Race Card from Gaming Technologies to Model Minorities. And we also hosted an online game designer talk titled The Glitch, Jamie Faye Fenton, and Transgender Video Game History by Dr. Whitney Powell from NYU University. New York University. So the series of workshop, presentation, critique sessions, author conversations, and other events as part of Patching Default Settings were extremely generative for everyone involved to think through the logics of contemporary gaming practices and envision alternative ways of playing that might intervene in existing violences. In terms of scholarly outcome, this project successfully supported the intellectual development and completion of 7 peer-reviewed publications. In addition to providing intellectual support for publications, this project was also instrumental in placing our studio in dialogue with game scholarship internationally and increasing the visibility of our scholarship. As such, on top of the peer-reviewed publication, the project also resulted in 14 peer-reviewed presentations by faculty and students at 13 different academic conferences and professional meetings based across the world, from Taiwan to the US to the UK. The activities conducted for Patching Default Settings also enabled us to apply to the Mellon Foundation's inaugural Just Futures Initiative competition, funding projects up to $5 million over the span of 3 years. As part of a multi-institution collaboration with Dr. Ann Kang-Hoon at the University of Michigan, Dr. Alex Agloro at University of Arizona, Dr. Veronica Paredes at University of California, Los Angeles, Dr. George Hoagland at the Minneapolis College of Art and Design, among many others, we submitted a multidisciplinary project titled Creative Disruption, Building Anti-Racist Infrastructure Through Community-Centered Design to tackle the long existing fault lines of racism, inequality, and injustice in education by generating innovative research projects, pedagogies, and curricula. Though the application did not proceed to the Foundation's final selection, we are planning to continue pursuing other external funding sources related to this project. So hopefully this short presentation was able to give you a sense of our studio as well as our Hearts Grant funded project, Patching Default Settings. Thank you for listening. I look forward to questions.
Thank you so much, Dr. Wu. Our next presenter is going to be Dr. Juan Llamas Rodriguez. And Dr. Rodriguez, you can go ahead and share your screen when you're ready.
Yes, thank you, everyone. I'll be presenting about the Hearts grants that I applied with Dr. Heidi Cooley, which actually was the same cycle, similarly as Dr. Wu and Dr. Newman. And part of my presentation is in some ways a story about you having the funds, but also having to quickly change given a number of conditions. So our idea for originally applying to the grant came because in spring of 2019, the then Dean of ATEC, Ann Balsamo, was contacted by the Shared Studios Portals project about bringing a portal to campus, sponsoring a portal on campus. For people who are not familiar, the Portals project is a series of reused shipping containers that are placed in different cities and towns around the world. And then they will host live connections. So this picture is from when it was set in Clyde Warren Park in downtown Dallas. And the idea is there'll be a curator, a curator that will bring in people to talk to someone halfway around the world through the platform of the portal. And so once the dean had been contacted about having this opportunity, she put both Dr. Cooley and I in touch and asked if we were interested in leading the project if it were to come to ATEC. So we were in a series of conversations about the possibility of that project. And Dr. Cooley suggested that if we were to have this platform on campus, it would be great to have some sort of event curation and or programming, public programming around having that portal. And I thought that was a great idea. And so that's when the first Hearts grant came out, the call for applications. So we applied, and our project was to do a series of public programming around how do media technologies both facilitate but also hinder transnational communication. Dr. Cooley, as one of the co-directors of the Public Interactive Research Lab, and me, in my interest around global media, felt like we were bringing two different sides to this kind of question around media platforms and transnational connections. by the time we heard that we got the Hearts grant, the project was not coming to campus anymore, and that was for a series of reasons. One of which was it's just very expensive to host this shipping container, and the amount of like electric bills would just be too much. However, we already had the grant, and I think to some extent we realized that the questions that we were asking could be asked without having the portal itself, and so we reframed during that summer the way we were going to use the grant, and we came up with having a 3-day symposium called Platforms to the World, in which we had 3 invited workshop leaders who were bringing expertise in different areas around media platforms, and media infrastructures, and global media. This were Fegme Hebrer from NYU, who does a lot of work around documentary and Asian migration, Carlos Jimenez from the University of Denver, who studies a lot of the communication technologies used by migrant subjects, and Shannon Maron at the New School, who does a lot of work around urban architecture and infrastructures. And the idea is we would want to have a broad sense of people who are all thinking around these topics from a variety of disciplines and settings, and bring them all together for a 3-day symposium on campus. So this was our call for participation. And these are some stills from the website that the ATEC communications team put together for us. So shout out to them, because it was a really great sort of bringing all together of the different aspects of the project. So we sent out a call for participation. We received around 30 or so applications, and we ended up accepting around 15 to 17 people to come. And we wanted a sort of wide variety, not only of topical interests, but also different career stages. We had grad students, postdocs, early career scholars, and senior scholars come in. And the grant really helped not only to facilitate the logistics of the event, but also to subsidize grad students in order for them to be able to come to the event. It was a 3-day event. And one of the ideas that we really wanted to try out is not to do it at a traditional sort of people come and just present their research, but rather we had a session in the first day in the morning where people would present their research in a 5-minute sort of like, what are they called? A 5-minute presentation. And then based on that, we would have a series of workshops where people with different interests came together to design and rethink how we use media platforms for transnational connections. That's our symposium schedule. As part of the symposium, we also had an opening plenary, which I moderated with our 3 workshop facilitators. And that part was open to the entire public, to the campus. So that was on a Thursday evening, and it was open to anyone who would want to come. And then we also had a reception afterwards. And then the Friday and Saturday events were only for the participants, so that we would have a sort of tight-knit group of 20-ish people working together over 48 hours on these different topics. One of which included a visit to the Trinity River, and we were using that as a sort of metonymy for thinking about bridges and separation. And also because for people who may be familiar, that area itself is rapidly gentrifying. So we're also thinking about the sort of changing urban landscape and the displacement of people within the urban setting as well. And so that was cold, but it was very fun activity as well. And so this happened on January 31st, 2020, which if you check on the dates, that means that we were less than 2 months away before shutting down for the pandemic. So in our last workshop on February 1st, we actually brainstormed a whole bunch of things that we thought we could do in the rest of the year to follow up on the conversations. And we didn't follow up on any of those, because by the time we contacted everyone in April to check in, everyone was overwhelmed. We were all trying to figure out what to do with the pandemic. And so we didn't actually follow up in a direct line from that, but actually a lot of other things came from it. So luckily we got the extension on the Hearts grant for the few funds that were left after that. And one of the projects that we tried to do as a sort of quick response to the fact that the pandemic was ongoing was a sort of digital humanities data collection project. We were able to hire a undergrad research assistant to help do a sort of quick response collating of information of the different borders that were being closed because of the pandemic, as a way to also start thinking about the sort of border logics that we were discussing throughout the workshop and the symposium as well. And our plans was to develop a series of sort of data visualizations around these kinds of issues. We didn't get that far just because of time, and because there were other projects ongoing around the world who were doing that kind of work. But it was very helpful because our undergrad research assistant was able to publish a white paper that she used for a number of grad school applications related to this research as well. So in some way, it did help in terms of encouraging student research as well. So this was 2021, but more recent, 2021, yeah. Let me go back. In the summer of 2021, one of the projects that came from our discussions in that symposium actually was with another one of her colleagues here, Dr. Kim Knight. And in her expertise being on wearables, wearable technologies, and data visualization, one of the ideas that we started thinking about around in the Platforms to the World Symposium was around a project that would bring together wearables and thinking about migrant narratives. And so from those discussions, she and I applied to the Digital Projects for the Public grant for the NEH in summer 2020, actually, yeah, in summer 2020. And we applied to the NEH grant. We did not get it, but we did get a lot of good feedback for it, which led to another UTD research grant, which will be a different session. But that was one of the projects that sort of got kickstarted from the platform and grew from that. More recently, a workshop from a roundtable with a number of people from that initial symposium, Carlos Jimenez and one of the postdocs who came, Ishita Tiwari. We organized a roundtable at the recent Society for Cinema and Media Studies. And that has been the launching pad for a sort of transnational network where we're trying to think about migrant narratives and the role of media platforms in that as well. So all those conversations that we left off in January 2020 that we thought we would pick up later that year, that got interrupted by the pandemic, in some ways are finally getting picked up 2 years later and building into hopefully something bigger. So in some ways, it was a matter of adapting to different circumstances every time, but having the sort of supportive hearts throughout those 2 years has helped move these kinds of questions that in some ways I first thought it was very much in a micro sense to just the Portals project has now gone into a number of different directions and sort of created a bigger web as well. So thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Llamas Rodriguez. And I really appreciate just the information you provided about pivoting and you all having to do that and helping us understand that it's okay to do that. Next up, last but not least, we have Dr. Matthew Brown. Dr. Brown?
Hi, okay, thank you. So my Hearts grant came relatively late in the development of the first sort of major stage of the project I'm going to tell you about, which sort of culminates in the production of my book, Science and Moral Imagination, which is really like the culmination of about a decade of work in philosophy of science that I've done, looking at the role of values in science, the ethical responsibilities of scientists, and sort of pragmatist theories of scientific inquiry. And I sort of explore the idea that the decisions that scientists face in the course of their work generally can't be decided on factors of logic and evidence alone. They typically have to take into account various types of value judgments in the course of their work, and they have responsibilities to various stakeholders and to society as they consider those decisions and the values that are at stake. So the book was already sort of fully drafted and under contract with the University of Pittsburgh when I applied for the Hearts grant. What I was seeking to do with the Hearts grant was really two things. One was to get help with some of the sort of production aspect of the book. I was able to get funds to support a graduate student to help me with the index of the book. And I was also seeking to get a wider dissemination of the book by paying the University of Pittsburgh Press open access fee so that the electronic version of the book would be free and accessible to anybody. And I was able to do that with the Hearts Grants funds and some other personal research funds I had available, and some support from the Center for Values in Medicine, Science, and Technology. And as a result, a few different things have happened, right? So I was also able, thanks to the support, to kind of put together a modest companion website for the book. I'll send that link out as well, in case you're interested. But a few different things happened as a result, particularly of the open access publication of the book. So although the book was only published in fall of 2020, it's already like my third most cited publication. It's been the subject of a review symposium. It's been cited in the journal Nature Climate Change by a group of climate scientists and philosophers talking about the importance of values in climate science. I've had many people tell me that they are using the book to teach various aspects of philosophy of science to their students. I've been invited to guest lecture to classes in different universities based on the fact that they're reading my book. So it's really helped, I think, the dissemination of this work much faster than would be typical for a monograph in philosophy of science that was published in a more traditional way. And so I think that's been a big benefit of the Hearts Grant for this work. The other sort of major benefit is that it's sort of the availability of this work has helped me more easily make connections for collaboration for sort of future projects using some of the ideas in the book. So in the book, I develop a kind of tool or framework for scientists to help them think about making value judgments in the course of scientific inquiry that I call the moral imagination framework. I've got now two major collaborative projects in kind of exploratory phases as a result. One is we've got a National Science Foundation grant under a proposal under consideration to use that framework for ethics education for engineering students who are doing research and design in engineering, to develop kind of educational modules. So I'm working with a psychologist who does educational psychology and a professor in the engineering school to develop some educational modules. We're seeking funding for that. So hopefully this summer we'll find out whether we got that grant. I also have developed a collaboration, I'm exploring a collaboration with a philosopher at the University of Utah who spends about half of her time doing what they call research ethics consults, right? So she specifically works with their Office of Research to provide consulting services for principal investigators in science and engineering and medical fields who are facing ethical questions, who are not yet, at the stage where they're like reporting some issue to the IRB or anything like that, but they're really like, they want to know what the right thing to do is. They're trying to figure out what their responsibilities are, and it's a kind of, I guess you would say, a judgment-free space where they can get guidance on those issues without pulling in the compliance mechanisms of the research integrity office, right? So we're now exploring the possibility of using the framework I develop in my book in the context of research ethics consults, and bringing the sort of that research ethics consult process to UT Dallas in the future as well. And so we'll be actually hosting Dr. Joyce Havstad from University of Utah in a couple of weeks at the Center for Values to talk to us about the research ethics consult stuff. We'll be meeting with people in the Office of Research and hopefully also developing a grant proposal related to that work, maybe in the fall. So that's what I've been able to do thanks to the Hearts grant. Yeah, I'm happy to answer questions or give advice as well. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Brown, and to all of our presenters. You know, as you can see, this Hearts grant is applicable for project beginnings, changing projects, final project needs. Speaking of this grant, I would like to throw a question to Emily Lacy. Emily, can you tell us what you think from your side, what interested faculty need to know about applying for the Hearts grant?
I think the key is that to remember that the reviewers are not specific to your school, and so it's a general review, and so it needs to be understood by everybody, but you also need to keep in mind that the point is to bring things to UTDs, to increase our visibility. And so if it's just going to bring benefit to yourself, you're going to need to rearrange how you phrase it to show how it's impacting UTD. Because the point is we want to bring more interest to UTD and to raise our visibility. And so if you can phrase it more that it's more holistic of the entire university, then that will serve you better for the reviewers. But just keep in mind that the reviewers are more generic reviewers and not specifically for your discipline. Especially for the seed grants can morph over many different schools, many different departments, and so it's more of a collection of people, and so you'll need to write according to that.
Thank you, Emily. I have one final question, and I will have each of our faculty presenters answer this. What is just one piece of advice you guys would give interested in faculty for applying for the grant? And I will go backwards. I'll start with Dr. Brown.
Yeah, I think in addition to writing the grant proposal in a way that's broadly accessible, which I think is excellent advice, I think it's really important to make a clear connection between the sort of budget items, like what you're spending the money on. And by the way, there are restrictions what you can't spend the money on that you should make sure you're clear on. But make those connections between, you know, what you're spending the money on and what the benefit is, right? So make it quite clear how the impact of the funds is going to be realized, be implemented.
Thank you, Dr. Brown. Dr. Llamas Rodriguez.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. One thing sort of related, and also not only for when I applied, but when I was a reviewer for the grant, the 2 years after that, is the feasibility of the project. I guess tied to also the budget and what the meaningful of that is, but also it is a set amount of money. So the more that you can make the case that this is something that I can do with this money and then lead to other things is makes it for a more compelling one, because I do remember seeing applications that were very fascinating, very interesting, well written, but it just did not seem to match the kind of resources that they would be getting from something like the Hearts grant. So feasibility, I think, is important too.
Thank you, and Dr. Wu.
Thank you. I just want to add on to all of the points already raised, like feasibility related to the reviewer from a wide range of backgrounds. The question of so what is oftentimes what I look for when I'm reviewing projects or when I'm writing projects, anchoring it in a clear so what, as into why do we need to attend to this topic in this particular research right now? What is the political significance? And I think that as a broader situating and the kind of context that we share, and then moving into the specific of the project, that always helps me when I'm thinking about writing a project or proposing something, as well as when I'm reviewing, into anchoring the concrete so what.
Well, thank you all. We do not have any more questions, so I will say again, thank you all for joining us today. Dean Romer, Dr. Brown, Dr. Llamas Rodriguez, Dr. Wu, and Emily. Audience, thank you for attending our program today. To stay aware of Office of Research and Innovation information and programming, please follow us on Instagram and Twitter and subscribe to our newsletter. Feel free to use your phone to scan the QR code on the slide or follow the links that will be posted in the chat. Finally, please take a moment to complete our research events survey. We will look forward to having you for an upcoming Office of Research and Innovation event. Thank you and have a nice afternoon.